Greetings, mind crafters, and welcome to another Minecraft discussion on this beautiful day. This is Kimberly Quinn. Looking forward to having this just exciting discussion today from my back deck in northern Vermont. Today's a little bit overcast, absolutely lovely, just a lovely day. And so, what I want to talk about today is shifting into a place of quality thinking versus appearance thinking. So I'll start right away and just sort of ask you to ask yourself, how pleased are you with your own life? Ask yourself, how pleased are you with your own life? And the reason that I think it's important to ask ourselves this is we can get way too wrapped up in how other people think our life is going. We can really get locked into it actually and stuck. And I think that's true the younger you are, but certainly, you know, uh, doesn't mean we're exempt when we, hit midlife, the age of wisdom there, because depending on, family situations and dynamics and all that sort of thing, some of that can still be lingering, but it's definitely the young adults, I think, wrestle with this a bit. And it's so important to really ask yourself, who am I doing this for? And why, and what's my motivation? Is it to please other people, to please me? I mean, it's really, really important. And also when I think this is also more of a young adult thing, but not necessarily so, because again, it's all depends on lots of things. Our filter system, how we were brought up, what our relationships were growing up, all that sort of thing. So if we get into thinking, somebody at work doesn't like me, or they really don't like you, and then I don't know. My answer to that one is who cares? It's their loss. But let's say we just perceive that they don't like you, and so it's really important, because a lot of times we get wrapped up into questioning this, like kind of looking over my shoulder. What could I have said? What could I have done? And were they hurt? And did I say something I didn't know I said? And I'm not talking about being blatantly hurtful. I think we're pretty aware when we do that, and then that's important, obviously, to try to make amends with that. We're not talking about blatant hurtfulness. We're talking about petty questioning and self doubt about, did I look at him the wrong way? Do you think she read my face wrong? All this is guessing of self that's ridiculous. It's just absolutely ridiculous because this means that we are living outside of our frame. When we live, picture a picture frame around you from like the chest up, right? So when we're born into this world, we're in the little frame, little baby frames. That's your frame of authenticity. In there is all the self love and confidence and esteem and belief in yourself. Little babies are born into this world loving themselves, knowing everybody who gazes upon them loves them, cherishes them, wants them, everything. And then, of course, something happens out in the world and things are said to us and things happen, life happens and stuff, and we can be pulled out of our frame. Our frame is still there, it's still waiting. We just can be residing outside of there temporarily, intermittently here and there. And that's sort of the problema. Okay, so we're saying that, your authentic your authentic, you know, self, who you are, your authentic James, your authentic Declan, your authentic Antonio, your authentic Melissa, your authentic whoever is inside that frame. So when the authentic self does not need anybody else's approval. The authentic self, like that little baby self, is whole. She or he whole and complete exactly as they are. Again, know that they're loved, know that they're cherished, know that they're wanted. All of it. Sun rises and sets on their little baby self and the little baby frame. When we're now remember okay. So then outside the frame is when the ego gets involved. And remember that the ego is the evil twin of the authentic self. So outside that frame, we get pulled out of our frame. We start, dipping into other people's frames. This is what happens when we are seeking external approval, because the authentic self again doesn't need anyone else's approval. That infant needs no one else's approval. And those on the authentic journey, we're not talking about perfect because nobody is. We're talking about pretty rock solid in your skin, on your authentic path, whole and complete, don't need anyone else's approval. When we're outside the frame, we're chasing down external approval. And this is a real big problem it doesn't feel good for one. We get a little bit of a dope fix when we get their approval, but then it's fleeting, right? It passes very quickly because then we end up seeking out more. So it's kind of got a half life. We can actually be addicted to needing other people's approval. We call that codependency. It's part of it. It's more complicated than that. But the thing is, it sets us up to really be pushing the envelope farther and farther away from authentic happiness because when we are needing approval outside of us, seeking it out, needing the kudos and the appreciation and all that stuff, that means we have our needs outside of us when our needs really belong inside the frame. When our needs are inside the frame, this means we have control over getting those needs met. When our needs are outside the frame, where I have to do this so so and so likes me, I have to do this so my boss thinks I'm great, I have to do this because I need my mother's or father's or mother in law's or whoever's approval. All that stuff means our needs, it means we cannot be happy and feeling, happy and satisfied and fulfilled unless we check all those boxes that we don't even have control over. So that is a really rather huge problem when we're talking about, one's overall well-being and life satisfaction and fulfillment. So it's super important to remember this and catch ourselves. And I think even the most seasoned of us, and when you're comfortable in the age of wisdom in your middle middle life and later years, we all can get sucked in at times, especially if there's a relationship that feels like it's our Achilles, and we can, but it's important though, and it's important to really be aware of it so that we can catch ourselves when we start to kind of peer around the outside of our frame to pull ourselves back in because we need to realize that whatever people are saying are just their opinions. They're going through the filter of that person and everything they've been through, what birth order they were they born in an urban or rural environment or suburban environment, all the life experiences they had, their wiring, their personality trait, everything. So whatever they're saying is 95 plus not percent about you anyway, and it's gone through their own filter because we are all the main characters on our own stage, and that's just the fact, Jack. So when we look at these, we got to say, okay, uh, in your head or to them, depending on what the circumstance is, that's your opinion. Okay, thank you for the information. Then that's it, and keep moving. Whether you want to actually say it to them or just keep it silent, that's just their opinion. A lot of people, they'll talk about their reputations, right? Their reputations, not realizing sometimes that it doesn't really exist because your reputation, my reputation, anybody's reputation, is in everybody else's heads, right? Because a reputation is what someone thinks of you. It doesn't reside in you. When you talk about your reputation, it's how everybody else thinks of you. That's what a reputation is, right? Somebody says, I have an outstanding reputation. Then she's saying, lots of people think I'm great. I'm not saying it in a cocky way. You can have an outstanding reputation authentically. Let's say teaching or just in the community is just being a stellar person, or in your church community, or, so and so is an outstanding. No one said that that's bad. It is just the truth that what you're saying is, basically like the majority of people in this context that I'm talking about think I'm awesome. That's what that means. And so we can't control what other people think, obviously. So the whole idea of a reputation is really just saying lots of people think I'm great. That's what it is. There's no such thing that resides in you. Okay, and here's why it's of utmost importance to catch yourself when you start to get pulled out of your frame, and also not beat yourself up for it either. That doesn't help anything. Like, let's say you are, and I'm a fabulous 58, and it happens to me sometimes. I am very aware of it, and I catch myself. I would say most often in the workplace. Not that it happens a lot there either, but when it does happen, it's typically there. I'll say, wait, wow, I don't need to. I don't care how many levels up that person is. And it's not about doing a good job. Of course, do your best. Do your best. I give 110%. To I love my students and everything. We're not talking about that, but it's somebody 3 or 4 levels up who didn't really acknowledge you or didn't give you who cares? And here's the thing is whenever we get wrapped up in that, it's really, really bad. And here's why. Because when we get wrapped up in that and give all this care and concern into what whoever, whatever thinks whatever, we are making a statement to ourselves, which is the most important person you can make it to, that we care what they think more than what we think of ourselves. That is awful because that's self abandonment. And that's the number one worst thing you can do is betray yourself, which is what that is. no matter on what level, even on that small. And the thing is, because that's how the brain works, positive or negative, when we do, do little behaviors, micro behaviors, bigger behaviors, the more we do, the more we reinforce, the easier it gets to keep doing the pattern. That's just how it works, positive or negative. So if you get in a habit of, caring about what other people think, it gets easier and easier and easier, because that becomes the brain's default thought pattern. Well, this is what we do, so and so out here, and it's further reinforced to the like nth degree when you actually do get a person's approval, because it feels like a dope hit, right? Even though in the end it's not good at all. Okay, and here's the thing: as far as the approval things go, the approval issue goes, the person who's whole and complete, living in their authentic frame, doesn't need any of that appreciation or the kudos. You did this and that for the PTO, you did that and that for at work, you did this and that for the family reunion. You don't need the kudos and appreciation and approval and all that. Doesn't mean it doesn't feel good. It feels really good to me when I go do a presentation or something and people stay. That's one of my favorite parts. I love when people stay after and share their own personal stories with me. It's just, I absolutely love that part of speaking. And they'll say all kinds of nice things and compliments. I remember after my two TED talks, they stayed there and waited for a while, and they said such nice things and shared such nice information about themselves. And I was like higher than a kite on that authentic conversation. It doesn't mean it doesn't feel good. It feels great, especially when it's authentic. And but it doesn't mean I don't go looking for it. If it happens, I bask in the good feels. This just feels so good. And then I do a gratitude thing with myself. Like, I just let it in and I breathe, feel the good feels, breathe, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then just breathe again. And that's it. Versus needing them and going looking for them and actively seeking out approval. That's codependent behavior, which isn't good for anybody. What's also interesting, it sounds kind of Murphy's Law-ish in a way, and it's actually Buddhist, right? The whole Buddhist concept of detaching, and it works beautifully here. And you may have noticed this, because if you're in that place again, you don't want to beat yourself up. If that's where you are on your path, that's where you are. It's okay. There's not like an authentic race, We get there when when really we're always getting there. When it's not like it's ever over, right? So you are where you are, and that's fine. Um, so the whole Buddhist thing with detaching. Think about this. Think about when people at work or school, or maybe whatever you're volunteering for, and it's your kids, parents at a kid's sport thing or whatever, who just walk in the room and they tend to just get people's approval, and they don't even care. People throw up all over them, and you did this, you're amazing, and they don't care. They have to authentically not care for this to be real. And it seems like they just get this unending approval of people. They just kind of have the room when they walk through the door. Those are some loud birds. They just kind of had to have the room when they walk through the door, and that's because they don't need it. Again, doesn't mean they don't like it, but they don't need it. So the irony is, the more you chase down approval, the less you're going to get it, and it's going to be fleeting and just lead to nowhere good, because codependent behavior is of the ego and not the authentic self. I'm sorry to break it to you, but it's super common. I worked through some of it for a while in my younger years. Just there's all different ways to be codependent, but the external approval seeking is a big one. And I definitely had that for quite a while, because I grew up with two very alcoholic, abusive parents, and some mental illness in the house, as you know, if you listened before. And so I was kind of conditioned to go find approval elsewhere, because it wasn't mirrored for me in an authentic way early on. I'm not saying in a part me way at all. I'm absolutely over that, and healed with it all and everything. It's been a wonderful journey, honestly. I just share with people because I think it helps when you share things, especially after you're past them, because I don't have any emotion attached to it anymore, because it helps people. And I know that people shared things with me when I was in that place and working through it, and it was enormously helpful. So there you go. So there was a while when I had to, and I'm a good person anyway. I like to do good things for people. But there's doing good things for people in a mindful way, and there are ways when you're doing good things for people to feel good about yourself. You're probably not even aware of that, but I wasn't aware of it either. I'm thinking back to my college years and things like that. And after that, for quite a while, my 20s basically, and maybe into my 30s a little bit. And I had a friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine of many years, have a very kind, loving talk with me. And he's he's my life mentor, actually, one of them. And Dr. Dave, and he said, "Did you ever, so kind, with such gentleness and kindness." I think I was probably maybe I was in my early 30s or late, I don't know, something. And he said, "Do you ever wonder why, because you are a good person, you enjoy doing all these things you're doing. Did you ever stop and think," and I forget his exact words, but he was trying to steer me towards figuring it out myself, that I was doing some of these things to try to fill myself up, like where there were wounds, like I'm a good person because I'm doing this, that, and that, running myself ragged. So that's also a way to be codependent. So that's a way to that's also wrapped into what we're talking about, which is approval seeking, right? It's all the same family of codependent behavior, and it's soul hole filling, right? We got a wound, just like we try to fill ourselves up with alcohol, weed, sex, shopping. It is the same dynamic, and it's tougher to often figure out because those other things are so overtly obvious, with the drinking, or reckless sex, or spending reckless, all those things, trying to fill ourselves up with the feel good stuff. These behaviors looking for approvals is the exact same dynamic. We're trying to feel good. We're self-medicating with other people's approval. It's not different than sucking down a bottle of Grey Goose. I mean, it's not as physically damaging, or it can be, actually, if you're in a violent relationship due to this. Then I guess it is. But the point is, it gets under the radar more because people can think, "Oh, look at me, look at me, look at what a good person I am," and maybe you are, but it's not because of all these things you're doing. That's because you're addicted to other people's approval, and that is psychological something that is in need of healing, um, so that you can return to your place of authenticity. So think of it as, when you're trying to, you're in that approval seeking mode, kudos seeking, appreciation seeking, doing good things mindlessly for codependent reasons versus mindfully, and you're not by how you feel. One is an authentic good feeling, and one is more depleting, and maybe not depleting right away because you're too wrapped up in the dope fix, but it comes, because then usually what follows mindless giving is eventually resentment, kind of like the PTO, mom or dad or whoever, who's that, after you've picked up so and so, Susie, Mrs. whoever's kids for the 19th time, and she's never returned the favor. You made brownies 96 times. Eventually that becomes some resentment usually sets in. Mindful giving is you stay within your frame, so you're not getting depleted because you're doing what you can do, and only what you can do, no more no less. You're doing your best, and that's it. And you do it because you really authentically feel good about it. You're not living outside your frame, you're living inside your frame. And so picture this, like when you're in that codependent mode, is trying to water flowers with a can that has a hole in it. You keep filling it up and wonder, why aren't they getting what they need? Because it keeps running out of water, and you're spending all this energy, to give them, 3 drops, because it's running out of the back of the can. Whereas if it were full, like authentically full, you could feed them with a fraction of that amount of water, and you wouldn't be frustrated because you'd be living inside the can, so to speak, the frame. So it's just really important to recognize this and shift into from the appearance outside the frame thinking to the quality inside the frame thinking. Knowing your value, and and knowing the limits as far as your boundaries, because people who value themselves are able to set appropriate and respectful boundaries. The codependent crew, not so much, and that's why they get run ragged. All right, so shifting from appearance thinking to quality thinking. This is Kimberly Quinn signing off from the beautiful northern Vermont. Have a mindful day.